Hi, I'm Rosalind. I served 8 years overseas, came back home thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd still have a place at the table. But my cousin saw my VA check, called it fake, and fed it into the shredder with a smile. No one stopped her, not even my mother. And while they erased my name from the family wall, they quietly forged papers, sold what was mine, and smiled in church like nothing ever happened. You ever feel like your own blood wrote you out of the story? Because I did. And I wonder, how many other veterans came home to the same silence? The Greyhound pulled away behind me, leaving only tire dust and a worn bench with my name never called. I stood there, boots planted in gravel, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, wind pressing cold against my neck like a warning I didn't ask for. 8 years gone, and not a single familiar face, not even a glance. Missoula wasn't the same, not that I expected it to be. The gas station across the street used to be run by the Johnsons. Now it was some generic franchise with LED signs and a soulless logo. Even the air felt different, less pine, more asphalt. I started walking the mile to my grandmother's house, now supposedly managed by my cousin Vera. Every step was a conversation in my head, what I'd say, how I'd keep things civil. I passed the old middle school, where I once threw a punch defending my little brother from bullies. No one's talked about that in years. I doubt they even remember. The house came into view, nestled in a row of plain homes aged by frost and forgotten repairs. No porch light, no wreath. The blinds were drawn like the house itself didn't want to see me. A neighbor across the street, Mr. Kepler, still in his faded military cap, spotted me and gave the barest lift of his fingers. I nodded, didn't stop, didn't expect him to shout, "Welcome home," either. At the front door, I adjusted my duffel, took a breath, and knocked. For a moment, nothing. Then footsteps, heels, sharp and certain. Vera opened the door. She blinked, not shocked, just mildly inconvenienced. "Oh, I thought you weren't coming." No hug, no smile, just a once-over and a step back. I walked in without a word. The smell hit me, disinfectant, old furniture, and something artificial, like cheap candles trying to cover tension. "Guest room's still back there," she said, nodding down the hall. "Though it's more of a storage space now. We weren't exactly expecting overnight guests." I turned my head just enough to make eye contact. "I'll manage." The room was cluttered. Boxes stacked knee-high, a folded treadmill in one corner, a single blanket thrown across a love seat like a last-minute attempt at pretending hospitality. No bed, no pillow. No place to put my bag but the floor. She lingered in the doorway. "You've been gone a long time. Things are different now." The way she said different made my stomach clench, not because of what it meant, but because of how deliberately she wanted me to hear it. Different, as in, we moved on without you. I unpacked the bare minimum, toiletries, a change of clothes, my VA paperwork, and the check. I tucked the check into a zippered sleeve in my wallet, like it needed protection from more than just air. Later that evening, the family dinner unfolded in that odd, formal way only Midwestern families can pull off. Overly polite, passive smiles, forced laughter. The kind of event where casseroles outnumber conversations. Vera floated through the room like she owned the air. She poured wine, offered extra rolls, called people sweetheart. The usual performance. I sat at the far end of the table, wedged between a houseplant and someone's new boyfriend who never made eye contact. My mother sat across the table, barely speaking. She nodded when I greeted her, but that was it. No, "I missed you." No, "Glad you're home." Just a half-hearted acknowledgement. The woman who once tucked me in during thunderstorms now couldn't manage full sentences. At some point during the meal, one of Vera's friends leaned in and asked, "So which one's your niece?" Vera smiled, bright and ready. "This is Lacey," she said, pointing across the table. "And this?" She turned toward a young girl with braces and curls. "This is our only niece. She's lived with us all her life." The words landed like a slap. Everyone smiled, nodded, moved on. No one corrected her, not even my mother. I sat there, fork still halfway to my mouth, and felt the blood rush to my ears. For a second, I thought I might say something, Might clear my throat and say, actually, I'm the one who's been in uniform for the past 8 years. But I didn't. I set my fork down, picked up my glass of water, took a sip, and swallowed the scream that wanted to claw its way out of my throat. They passed desserts like nothing happened, talked about local politics and whose kid got into what college. My name wasn't mentioned once. My chair felt colder than the rest. After dinner, I stepped outside alone. The air was sharper now, colder, like it knew something the others didn't. I sat on the steps, hands wrapped around my knees. The check was still in my wallet. I pulled it out, unfolded it gently. It was crisp, government issued, with the stamp of the VA on the top. A quiet acknowledgement of sacrifice, of service. I looked at my name. Rosalind M. Rowe. The name they had tried to forget. I whispered to the wind, soft, more to myself than anyone else. So this is what coming home looks like. I didn't sleep much after that dinner. I lay there on the lumpy couch cushion substitute Vera called a guest bed, staring at the ceiling. My body ached, not from the cold or the makeshift sleeping arrangement, but from something heavier, duller, that pressed into my chest like weight I'd carried for years but hadn't realized until it shifted. By the time the sky outside turned from black to bruised gray, I was already dressed. I tied my hair back, pinned it tight like I used to before heading into briefings. Precision was control. Control was survival. Down the hallway, I could hear dishes clinking and a news anchor mumbling something about road conditions. I didn't stop in the kitchen. Vera was sitting at the counter, cup of coffee in hand, flipping through her phone. She didn't look up. I walked past her and out the door. The streets were quiet that early. A few cars on the road, one jogger bundled up in a fleece zip-up, and the same empty bus bench I'd arrived at yesterday. My breath came out in short puffs. I shoved my hands deeper into my jacket and headed toward the community bank 2 blocks over. Vera worked there. Of course she did. I'd looked it up a few months ago when I was planning my return. I told myself I was being cautious. Maybe I was just looking for a reason not to come back. The front doors of the bank opened at 9, but I got there at 8:45. I waited across the street, watching the place wake up through glass windows. A woman in a blazer unlocked the side entrance. A young man with a lanyard set down 2 paper bags, probably breakfast for the staff. I waited for Vera to arrive. She didn't, which meant she was already inside. I crossed at the light and stepped into the warmth of the lobby just as the doors unlocked. It smelled of printer toner and lemon cleaner. The kind of smell that pretends everything's in order. The woman behind the reception desk greeted me with a polite smile. "Morning. What can we help you with?" "I need to cash a Treasury-issued disability check. I have my VA identification and driver's license." She nodded, handing me a small slip. "If you can fill this out, we'll have someone assist you shortly." I took the slip and sat. The lobby filled slowly. A man with a toddler, an older woman with a walker, a couple arguing quietly under their breath. "Rosalind Rowe?" the teller called out, voice bright. I stood, and there she was. Behind the glass window, station 3, stood Vera. She didn't flinch when she saw me, didn't blink, just motioned me forward like I was any other customer. I approached slowly, my file tucked under one arm. When I reached her window, she gave a tight smile. "Morning. How can I help you?" I didn't bother with small talk. "This is a VA disability check issued last week. I'd like to cash it." I slid the envelope through the opening along with my IDs. She glanced at the check, then back at me. "This looks off," she said, tone casual but with an edge. "Did someone print this for you?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" "These get faked all the time. People download templates and copy the layout." I stared at her, throat dry. "It's real," I said, voice low but steady. "From the Department of Veterans Affairs. My name, my ID. You know who I am." She gave a tight shrug. "Doesn't look right." She turned, stepped back, and, without another word, fed the check into the shredder behind her. The machine came to life with a high-pitched whir. I watched as the paper disappeared, inch by inch, into the blades. Government ink. Federal stamp. My name. Gone. A sharp gasp came from someone behind me. A man muttered, "What the hell?" I didn't move, didn't speak, couldn't. Vera returned to the window, voice smooth. "If you have concerns, you can file a dispute form, but we have a zero-tolerance policy for suspected fraudulent instruments." I stood there, motionless. The world had narrowed to the sound of that shredder and the sterile cold of her voice. Every year, every deployment, every moment of sacrifice, shredded like trash. I backed away slowly, not trusting myself to speak. My ears burned. My hands were ice. By the time I made it back to the house, my legs were trembling. I opened the closet in the hallway, the one where I'd stored my old things years ago, back when this place still felt like a home. The box wasn't there. I moved boxes, lifted lids, checked every shelf. Gone. I found Vera in the living room, half watching a morning talk show, phone in hand. "Where's my box?" I asked. She didn't look up. "What box?" "My military keepsakes, medals, patches, Dad's flag." She made a face like she was trying to recall a vague memory. "Oh, that junk?" "We cleared that stuff out last summer, garage sale." I felt something shift in me, like a fault line under pressure. "You sold it?" She shrugged. "It was just collecting dust. Nobody wanted it. Besides, we needed space." I didn't answer, just turned and walked down the hall to the bathroom. I locked the door behind me, sat on the closed toilet lid, and let my face fall into my hands. No tears came at first, just silence, and then the silence cracked. Not with sobs, but with something quieter, like surrender, but meaner. Later that night, I sat in the dark, lit only by the screen of my phone. I scrolled through my photo library until I found the image I'd taken weeks ago, before leaving base. The check, front and back. Crisp, documented, traceable. My fingers shook, not from fear, from clarity. They hadn't just shredded a piece of paper. They'd shredded my story, my identity. But they didn't know the one thing I'd learned from serving. You don't respond in anger. You respond in order. In strategy. Silas didn't ask questions. He just said, "Where are you?" That was the thing about military people. We were trained to recognize urgency without needing an explanation. I gave him the address, then waited. The sun hadn't risen yet. The house was still. From where I sat on the edge of that useless excuse of a couch bed, I could hear a faucet dripping somewhere in the house, the creak of old floorboards settling into silence, and the occasional murmur of someone snoring in another room. None of it felt like home. I didn't bother going to the kitchen. I didn't want to run into Vera. Or my mother. I didn't want to see anyone who could shred a check, or a memory, or a person, and then go back to sipping their coffee like nothing happened. Instead, I walked down the hallway barefoot. The wood was cold beneath me, and the family photos lining the hallway caught my attention. All the grandkids lined up on the wall, school pictures, weddings, vacations. I was never invited to. There used to be a photo of me in uniform right there near the center. It was gone. No empty hook. No gap. Just replaced. I stood in front of that wall longer than I meant to. Studying each smiling face, I kept wondering if they knew. If they'd agreed to it. If, during one of those dinners I missed, they voted to erase me. I reached the end of the hallway and paused in front of the door to my mother's room. The light was on inside. I knocked once, gently. "It's open," she called. I pushed the door just wide enough to slip in. She was sitting near the window, robe tied at the waist, book open in her lap, reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. She didn't look up. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined the entire last day. Maybe I dreamed Vera destroying the check. Maybe it didn't really happen. But then my mother spoke. "Rough day?" I swallowed. "You could say that." She didn't put the book down, just flipped a page, eyes scanning. I stood there awkwardly before finally asking, "Did you know Vera shredded my VA check?" Her eyes didn't move. "It's been hard for Vera. She's been the one keeping everything together since your father passed." I stared at her, stunned. So that's the cost of keeping everything together? You let her steal my money and sell my belongings? Her voice was calm, like she was discussing the weather. You've been gone for a long time, Rosalind. People adapt. I felt my heart twist, tight and unforgiving. So I deserved it? That made her look up. You left, she said simply. What did you expect? I couldn't breathe for a second. No anger, no denial, just that flat statement, like I was the one who walked out on them. Like 8 years of deployment, missed holidays, and trauma didn't matter because I hadn't come home in the way they wanted. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I turned and walked out, closing her door gently behind me, even though part of me wanted to slam it. Back in the cluttered guest room, I dropped onto the love seat and sat in the dim light. The edges of the room blurred around me. I reached down into my boot, the left one, the same boot I wore through Kabul, Mosul, and 6 months of sandstorms in Jordan. Hidden in the sole was a folded, laminated letter. I pulled it out and opened it slowly, careful not to tear it. The plastic edges were fraying, but the words inside were still legible. My father had written it before his final tour. I hadn't even known it existed until it arrived with his folded flag. Rosie, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I couldn't be there when you needed me most, but you need to remember something. You are my daughter. And that means you carry our name with honor. If anyone ever tries to take that from you, don't let them. You've earned your place. Don't let anyone rewrite it. I traced the last line with my finger. You've earned your place. A sob rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't going to cry again. Not tonight. Instead, I laid the letter on the arm of the couch, pulled a pen from my duffel, and scrawled something across a notepad. Names, dates, what I knew, what I could prove. Then I picked up my phone. The message to Silas was short. I need a favor, urgent. He called back less than 2 minutes later. Where are you? I told him. He paused. Okay, I'm listening. And for the first time in over a decade, I told someone the truth, not just about the check, but about the way I'd been cut out, sliced from my own family like I never mattered, about how no one blinked when my face disappeared from the wall, or when my medals were sold at a garage sale. I told him what Vera did, what my mother said, and what I intended to do next. Silas didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he exhaled into the phone. I'm going to make some calls, he said. You'll have a name by morning. A name? Someone at the Treasury Department, someone who still respects what it means to serve. I closed my eyes, the weight of the day finally settling in. Thank you. You don't need to thank me, Rosie. You're family to me, not by blood, but by something that actually matters. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a while longer, listening to the house breathe around me. Eventually, the sun began to rise, casting pale light across the cluttered floor. There was no ceremony, no trumpet, no flag raising. Just me, alone, staring at a letter from a dead man who still believed in me more than anyone living. Vera's words followed me out of the building, her voice still floating behind my ear like a fly I couldn't swat away. Careful who you bark at. If she thought that was going to shut me up, then she still didn't know who she was dealing with. I didn't go straight home. I needed to breathe, so I walked. Downtown Missoula wasn't large, but when you're angry, even 4 blocks can feel like miles. The late afternoon air was dry, cool, wrapped in the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. My boots scuffed the sidewalk as I passed storefronts I once knew, now replaced by new signage, different owners. The town had moved on without me, just like my family had. I made it back to the house just before dusk. Vera's car was already in the driveway, which meant she'd beaten me home. I didn't want another word with her tonight. Not yet. I slipped in quietly through the side entrance, straight into the laundry room, where I could wash the stale event smell off me without crossing her path. The water scalded. I let it. My skin flushed red, but it gave my mind something else to focus on. My jaw still ached from clenching it for so long. My temples pounded with the rhythm of anger denied its release. I didn't eat dinner, didn't go to the kitchen. I stayed in the room that barely passed for a guest space, tucked under a pile of folded laundry Vera hadn't bothered to put away. She probably left it there on purpose, like a subtle declaration that I didn't belong, not even enough to warrant a clear bed. Around 8, I turned off the light and sat in the dark, scrolling through the screenshots I'd taken at the event. There it was. My old project, Heroes Homebound. The one I helped found during my first year of active duty, meant to connect vets with housing grants and local resources. I remembered the brainstorming sessions, the late-night emails, the desperate outreach to local sponsors. And now, right there in print, founded by Vera Mayland. Her name on the website. Her face in the photo gallery. Me? Vanished again. The burn in my chest returned, stronger this time. She hadn't just let people think she was the one who served. She had taken the one thing I still had, impact, and twisted it into a PR piece. My phone buzzed. It was Silas. He kept it short. Got you, someone. You'll hear from them tomorrow. I replied with a thumbs up and turned the phone face down. I needed rest, but it didn't come. At some point in the middle of the night, the creak of footsteps in the hallway stirred me. I lay still, listening. It was Vera, recognizable by her overly cautious gait, the way she always walked like someone who didn't want to be caught doing something. She paused near my door, then kept moving. The next morning, the tension in the house had settled into that uncomfortable quiet, the kind where everyone pretends things are fine, even when the air buzzes with things unsaid. I poured coffee in the kitchen. My mother entered just as I brought the cup to my lips. She didn't say good morning. She stared at the floor, then asked, "You going to keep stirring trouble?" My grip on the mug tightened. Trouble? You embarrassed your cousin at a public event. That project meant a lot to her. That project was mine, I said plainly. She worked hard to keep it going. She erased me from it. Mom sighed, shaking her head like I was being unreasonable. Sometimes you just need to let things go, Rosalind. You're back now. Be grateful you're safe. Be kind. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm not going to be grateful to someone who's been feeding lies to this town. She pursed her lips, then walked out of the kitchen. I watched her leave without a word. I didn't owe her any more energy than that. Midday, I got dressed and headed out. I walked downtown again, this time with more purpose. I had an appointment, not official, not yet, but important. I met with a friend of Silas's who used to work in regional finance audits. He was retired now, but still knew people in the right places. You're not the first, he said after hearing my story. But you're one of the few with proof. I laid out everything, photos, documents, the timeline. He took notes, gave me a card with a contact at the office of the Inspector General. You file, you let them handle it. Don't go back to the bank alone, he warned. They'll circle the wagons, act polite until it's time to act loud. That night, I wrote down every single interaction I'd had with Vera over the last 3 months. Every piece of evidence I'd collected. I organized it into folders, physical and digital. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was ready. The day after, Missoula hosted a small community resource fair. Same venue, different event. I went again, knowing Vera would be there. And she was, right near the front booth, next to a banner that used the exact same slogan I had coined 4 years ago. She spotted me instantly. I approached slowly, calmly, smile frozen, but firm. When I was close enough, I leaned in and said, "You've stolen a lot. I let it go before. This time, I won't." Her smile didn't drop. She just said, "No one believes the angry vet, Rosie. Careful who you bark at." I didn't flinch. "I'm not barking," I said. "I'm documenting." And I walked away. Back home, I printed 2 copies of everything. One for me, one for the people who were about to make her regret every lie she'd wrapped in a smile. Then I'll just be law. The words left my lips like a quiet oath as I sealed the final envelope. The house was silent, save for the hum of the printer still cooling beside me and the slow tick of the old wall clock in the hallway. It was late, just past 11, but I wasn't tired. No, what I felt now was a sharper edge, like standing still in a storm you already saw coming. I took the folders and slipped them into my canvas tote. Everything was labeled, color-coded, and cross-referenced. Bank interactions, screenshot archives, emails between Vera and the property office, pulled from the public record using her own vanity email she'd once bragged about. Mayland legacy. You'd think if someone was going to commit theft, they'd do it under a burner account, not with a name that screamed narcissism. The next morning, I walked into the bank, not to argue, not to accuse, just to observe. I'd learned in uniform that sometimes silence had more power than confrontation. I wasn't going to give Vera the satisfaction of watching me lose control. Not again. The branch was busy. Tuesday mornings always were. People cashing paychecks, parents managing accounts before school pickup, retirees verifying balances. I took a seat near the front and watched. Vera stood at her usual teller window, all smiles and polite nods. Her tone was syrupy, her voice slightly higher than her natural pitch. Performance mode. She laughed too loudly at a man's joke, leaned too far across the counter when handing back a receipt. I knew that look, that false warmth. I'd seen it in officers covering their own messes overseas. Eventually, when it was my turn, I didn't go to her. I approached the junior clerk at the far end. She looked fresh out of college and visibly nervous. I handed her my ID and softly asked, "Could you print the transaction history tied to this account, including rejected deposits?" She glanced at the screen. I saw her eyes dart to Vera, then back to the monitor. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. I'm not sure I can access that," she whispered. "Let me—" "Don't," I said calmly. "I understand. Thank you." I stepped away. She looked relieved. I didn't blame her. People like Vera didn't just bully strangers. They trained their coworkers to anticipate consequences. Outside, I dialed Silas. "Morning," he answered. Always crisp, always direct. "I need official documentation from Treasury, anything tied to the check I submitted. I want to know what happened to it after it entered that bank." He didn't miss a beat. "Give me an hour." 45 minutes later, my phone vibrated with a secured file. I opened it while standing outside the bank, my tote still on my shoulder. My name was on the original VA-issued check. But the scanned record, processed and logged into the system under internal routing codes, had been tagged Duplicate Series Flagged, and notes in the margin showed the account was tied to Mayland V. Not a mistake, not a fluke. Vera had been depositing similar checks in her name. Mine weren't the first. I stood there, under the faded awning of the bank's side entrance, watching the screen as it showed months, years, of what looked like redirected or corrected checks. It wasn't just fraud, it was practiced fraud. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just stared. Then I turned toward the county courthouse. The records office wasn't far, a 15-minute walk. Missoula's downtown had always been small, and today, that worked in my favor. Inside, I stepped up to the counter and asked for access to the Mayland estate file. The clerk, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and coffee breath, looked me over, then tapped on his keyboard. "ID?" he asked. I handed it over. He typed, squinted, and then frowned. Looks like this was changed back in March. Transfer of property rights from Rosalind to Mayland, Vera. My breath didn't catch. My face didn't twitch. I just asked, "Was that notarized?" He clicked around, pulled up the image. I leaned over the counter. The signature wasn't mine. It was close, but not mine. "I never signed that," I said flatly. He hesitated. "It says the document was hand-delivered and notarized by a family member. No legal dispute was filed at the time." "Can I get a certified copy?" He nodded. "Sure, $2 per page." I pulled a 5 from my wallet and waited. When he returned, I took the copy, folded it slowly, and placed it next to my phone in the tote. The PDF from Silas was already loaded onto a USB. The digital and the paper now lived together in one place, a growing archive of betrayal. Walking back toward the house, I passed the coffee shop Vera used to work at in high school. I remembered her bragging once about being too good to sling lattes. And yet, here she was, slinging falsified documents like she was born for it. Back home, I brewed a cup of tea, not coffee. I needed clarity, not adrenaline. I sat at the dining table and pulled out my folders. I printed everything. One set for the OIG, Office of Inspector General, one set for the Federal Financial Crimes Division. I labeled each envelope with care, like I was filing deployment orders. My hands were steady now, my heartbeat even. Each folder represented something she'd tried to erase, my name, my service, my rights, but the paper didn't lie, not like people did. I packed the folders into separate mailers and addressed them by hand. No digital submission, no email attachment. These would be tangible, traceable, documented. As I sealed the final envelope, I whispered to myself, not in anger, but with finality, if I'm not blood to them anymore, then I'll just be law. The next Monday came like any other, calm on the surface but humming underneath with something I couldn't ignore. I was up before the sun, not out of habit, but out of necessity. I checked the clock. 6:42 a.m. I had time. I dressed in plain clothes, jeans, neutral sweater, low boots, nothing dramatic, nothing confrontational. My military ID and all the supporting documents were tucked into the folder I carried in a worn leather bag slung across my chest. I didn't need drama. I had proof. I skipped breakfast, just water, and the calmness of quiet resolve. By 8:15, I was walking past the old flower shop near the corner, its windows already glowing soft from the overhead lights inside. I passed a woman walking her dog. We nodded. Missoula was still Missoula in the morning. The bank came into view across the street. Familiar, unassuming, but today it felt like the center of gravity. It was 8:26 when I sat on the stone bench outside, facing the entrance. A breeze tugged at the hem of my sweater. I clasped my bag tighter and waited. Inside the bank, movement began around 8:40. Employees arriving, a delivery dropped off, the doors unlocked just before 9. I didn't rush to be first. I wanted to blend into the rhythm of the room. I entered with a small cluster of customers and took a seat near the center of the lobby. The smell was the same, cleaning products and printer toner, a hint of old carpet. I noticed Vera immediately. She hadn't seen me yet. She was standing behind her usual window, headset tucked neatly around her ear, glossy lips curved in her performance smile. I didn't approach. I didn't move. I just sat there quietly, watching her laugh with a man holding a checkbook, then offer to print him a duplicate receipt just in case. Her voice was soft, sweet, warm even. I knew it well. The charm she could turn on like a faucet when she needed to appear competent, loyal, irreplaceable. It was exactly 9:06 a.m. when the doors opened again. But this time, not to customers. 2 black SUVs parked with deliberate symmetry outside. 4 figures stepped out. 2 men, 2 women. Suits, sunglasses, purposeful steps. They didn't stop to chat, didn't scan the room. They knew where they were going. They walked directly toward Vera's window. The male agent in front, tall, built like someone who used to play Division I football and now worked in federal audit, pulled a badge from his inside pocket and placed it on the counter. "Miss Vera Mayland?" She froze. Her mouth still slightly open from whatever pleasant sentence she'd been mid-delivery. "Yes? I'm Special Agent Colin Reyes with the U.S. Treasury Office. You are not under arrest, but you are named in an ongoing federal audit concerning the unauthorized destruction of Treasury-issued property." Her face drained of color. All around us, the room seemed to stop breathing. A woman near the ATM gasped. Phones began rising, slowly at first, then in waves. The second agent, a woman with steel in her eyes, stepped forward and added, "We will need to speak with you privately, now." The branch manager emerged from his office at the back of the room. His tie was askew, his face read panic. "What's going on here?" Agent Reyes didn't even look at him. "You'll be briefed shortly. We have reason to believe one of your employees committed multiple acts of federal fraud using falsified documentation and unauthorized access to government instruments." "Is this about the VA thing?" the manager blurted, suddenly aware that people were listening. "This is about fraud," Reyes snapped, "not policy." As the agents began gathering documents from Vera's station, One of them, Agent Lind, walked toward me. She stopped right in front of my seat. "Sergeant Rowe?" I stood. "You'll receive formal updates from our office. Thank you for your cooperation." I nodded once, but I didn't speak. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that silence now was more powerful than anything I could say. Vera was being guided toward a private conference room. Her eyes darted toward me as she passed. There was no smirk this time, no condescension, just confusion, panic, and something else she'd never shown me before. Fear. They closed the door behind her. I stayed just long enough to see the blinds tilt shut. Then I turned to leave. Outside, the sun had finally cleared the rooftop of the bakery across the street. Two people passing by slowed when they recognized me. One of them, a man I didn't know, gave a slight nod. About time someone stood up to her. The other, a woman in a green rain jacket, didn't say anything, but her eyes told me she knew everything. I didn't go back to the house right away. I walked for a while, through town, toward the river trail that curved behind the shops and led to the community center. On a bench overlooking the water, I sat and let my muscles unwind. I wasn't triumphant, I wasn't elated, but I was steady. For the first time in weeks, my body wasn't carrying the tension of unspoken words and unwitnessed pain. My phone buzzed. A message from Silas. "All smooth?" I replied. "Smoother than expected. She's in it now." There was a pause, then his next text. "Good. That's what happens when people forget who they're dealing with." And I thought, no, they didn't forget. They never wanted to know me to begin with. Now they'd have no choice. Now they believe me. Let's finish this. 2 days had passed since the agents walked into that bank and turned Vera's world on its head. The buzz hadn't slowed. It had only grown louder. From grocery store lines to school parking lots, her name lingered like smoke. But I didn't talk. I listened. And I watched. I didn't expect what came next to fall into my lap as fast as it did. Thursday morning, I checked my email while waiting for the kettle to whistle. Among the junk and alerts was a message from Silas. No subject, no greeting, just a single line. Internal footage, courtesy of a sympathetic ex-employee. There was a file attached. I downloaded it slowly, my hands hovering above the keyboard like they already knew what I was about to see. The video began with standard bank surveillance, silent, grainy, time-stamped. Then it cut to her, Vera, at her station, my check in her hand. She looked annoyed, like she was dealing with a child or a persistent salesperson. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Then, without hesitation, she said, clear as day, "Let's see how much she still thinks she's a hero now." She smirked, and then slid the check into the shredder. My throat tightened. I stared at the screen, jaw locked. I paused it. Rewound, played it again. "Let's see how much she still thinks she's a hero now." I forwarded it to Agent Reyes with a short message. "This belongs in your file." By noon, the footage was online. Not by me, not by Silas. I didn't need it to be traced back. But someone else, probably the same sympathetic former employee, had leaked it to a local Facebook group dedicated to veteran affairs. By evening, it had been shared nearly 2,000 times. Comments poured in. Disgraceful. She should be charged. I'd give anything to see her face right now. Vera's supporters dwindled fast. Even the people who once fawned over her at community events started posting vague statements about trust and letting people down. The next day, the bank placed her on administrative leave. The local paper ran a short piece titled "Federal Investigation Shakes Local Bank." But that wasn't the part that mattered. What mattered was the town hall. The meeting had already been scheduled before any of this, just a routine quarterly forum meant to review local partnerships. But the topic list changed overnight. A new line item appeared. Public trust and community banking practices. I arrived early. Not because I wanted to make a scene, but because I wanted a seat in the back. I'd learned long ago that real power didn't sit center stage. It sat where it could see everyone else. The room filled fast. Folding chairs lined up in tight rows, a modest table at the front where a few city officials sat, trying to look composed. They failed. A buzz filled the room. People whispered in low tones, occasionally glancing back toward the doors as if waiting for someone specific to walk in. At 6:04 p.m., Vera arrived. She wore a navy dress, a beige coat, and a look that tried to pass for calm but didn't quite land. Her chin was up, but her eyes darted, left, right, back again. She took a seat near the front. The moderator welcomed everyone, then opened the floor to public comments. A few people spoke, questions about water infrastructure, a concern about speeding near schools. Then came the voice that cut through all of it. I have something to say. The woman stood near the middle row. Leora Penn. I hadn't seen her in almost a year. She'd worked at the bank for nearly a decade. Quiet, efficient, always kind. She wasn't flashy. She never got caught in Vera's orbit. Until she did. I was there the day the check was shredded, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. I saw it happen. I was told to keep quiet, or lose my job. The room shifted. Chairs creaked, eyes widened. Leora continued, reaching into a folder she brought with her. These are copies of internal communications. This one, she held up a printed email, was sent from Vera Malin's work account to me and 2 others, directing us to filter out red flag documents from high-risk customers, those without local community ties. She paused. She meant veterans. Murmurs rippled across the room. She targeted people she thought no one would believe, Leora said. People like Sergeant Rosalind Rowe. I didn't move, didn't blink. Vera stood. She's lying, her voice cracked. This is a setup. This is personal. But no one clapped for her. No one nodded. Instead, one of the town officials asked for Leora's documents and thanked her for her bravery. Vera stood there for a moment longer, chest heaving, eyes wild. Then she sank back into her chair. The moderator closed public comments shortly after, but the damage had been done. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, several people came up to me, quiet words, handshakes, a nod from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. You were right to speak up. She did you dirty, no doubt. Let us know if you need anything. But it was the older woman, white hair and a neat braid, Vietnam widow pin on her jacket, who said what I'd needed to hear all along. You made them look, she said. Sometimes that's all we get. But it's enough. I nodded, suddenly unsure how to respond. Outside, the air had cooled. Streetlights flickered on overhead as I walked slowly toward my car parked a block down. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I didn't smile, not yet, but I wasn't invisible anymore. The morning I walked into the Missoula County Courthouse, the sky was clean and quiet. No fanfare, just the low hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the weight of paper in my bag, the evidence of everything Vera tried to erase. The clerk behind the window was polite, if a little wary. He asked for my ID, which I handed over along with a certified copy of my father's original will and the forensic analysis confirming the estate amendment had been faked. This came in late March, he mumbled, flipping through the scanned files on his screen. Says you relinquished claim voluntarily. I leaned forward. Do you see that signature? He zoomed in, squinted. Yeah, that's odd. It's not mine. He blinked. You want to speak to probate? I want a judge. 10 minutes later, I was sitting alone in a cold hearing room with a plastic water cup and the kind of silence that tastes like chalk. When the door opened and the probate judge walked in, I stood without thinking. Force of habit. He nodded, adjusted his glasses, and sat down. Ms. Rowe? Yes, Your Honor. Looks like we've got a tangled situation here. I didn't argue, just slid the paperwork across the table. 20 minutes of testimony, line by line through each file. I let the documents speak for themselves. Vera wasn't present at first, but just as we were wrapping up, she burst in, heels clacking like gunshots across the floor. I object, she said, breathless. This is a smear campaign. The judge didn't even flinch. You'll sit down or I'll have you removed. Her mouth opened, then closed. The heir of record remains Rosalind Rowe, the judge said flatly. Any documents submitted after 2023 are void. All related transactions, including property transfer, are hereby frozen pending further investigation. He looked directly at her. If you attempt to interfere again, you'll be held in contempt. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I gathered my documents, nodded once to the judge, and walked out of that room with a silence louder than any victory speech. I didn't go home. Not yet. That evening, the Veterans Hall hosted a local appreciation ceremony. It wasn't meant for me. It had been scheduled months in advance, long before this war behind closed doors began. But I went anyway. There was no stage, just a small platform, folding chairs, and the steady presence of men and women whose lives had been worn into the fabric of this country. I found a seat near the back. The event moved quickly. Flag ceremony, a few commendations, polite claps. The kind of event where everyone knows each other and everyone behaves like it matters. Then I heard his name, Silas. I sat up straighter. He stepped forward, not in uniform, but in a plain navy jacket and jeans. No notes in his hand, just a calm, firm expression I knew from years ago. He tapped the mic. I wasn't supposed to speak tonight, but I asked. He paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. 8 years ago, we were pinned in a compound outside Kandahar. 4 of us, wounded, cut off. We lost radio contact. Panic doesn't begin to cover what we felt. His voice didn't waver. Except for one person. He turned, and though he didn't point, everyone's eyes followed his. Rosalind Rowe didn't panic. She got us out. She ran through open terrain with a busted leg, carried one of us over her back, called air support manually while bullets snapped past her ears. Silence. He continued. You don't hear stories like that. Because people like her don't brag. They survive, go home, and keep quiet. But that kind of courage deserves to be said out loud. Someone clapped, then another, and another. No one cheered. But they didn't need to. An older man with a silver beard leaned toward me and whispered, That's the kind of hero they forget to write about. I didn't respond. Just nodded slightly, throat thick. After the ceremony, a few people came to shake my hand. A woman pressed a small American flag pin into my palm. I remember your father, she said. You've got his eyes. I walked home from the hall. It was nearly dark. Streetlights blinked on in succession as I passed beneath them. As I neared the old family house, her house now technically, I slowed but didn't stop. A porch light glowed faintly in the distance. The curtains were drawn. She was in there. I knew it. And for the first time, I didn't care. I didn't need her apology. Didn't need her recognition. What she stole, I had taken back. Quietly, methodically, without a single raised voice. That was the difference between us. I kept walking. No fanfare, no crowd. Just me, and the quiet victory of knowing that no one would steal my name again. I passed the old house on foot, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. 3 months had rolled by since the court decision. Since Silas stepped up in front of a room full of people and rewrote my name into their memory. Since I walked out of that family with nothing in my hands but everything I needed. Missoula felt smaller now, not in a suffocating way, but like something manageable, familiar again, in the right kind of way. After the courthouse, I moved 30 minutes north, just past the edge of the lakeside. A retired buddy of my father's had left behind a small, weather-beaten cabin, nothing fancy, just wood, space, and peace. I used part of the settlement money to fix it up. New roof, solid foundation, insulation for the cold. No granite countertops, no stainless steel. But the walls didn't echo with judgment. That was enough. Delta, my rescue mutt, half shepherd, half whatever crossed her path before the shelter, followed me everywhere now. She slept near the fireplace. She'd bark at deer, but not at people. I trusted her instincts more than I trusted most folks anyway. The mornings were quiet. I'd wake up with the fog still pressed against the windows, brew a strong cup of coffee, and sit on the porch while the sun worked its way through the trees. Sometimes I'd walk down to the edge of the lake and skim pebbles just to hear them break the silence. Inside, there's a shelf next to the small stone hearth. On it sits a glass box, folded flag, unit patch, my dad's dog tags, and my own first set of medals. No one asks questions anymore. I don't offer stories unless someone earns them. One afternoon, mid-December, I got a call from a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. Old family friend, still tight with my mother. She kept her voice light, but I could hear the hesitation. "They're having a Christmas Eve dinner," she said. "Just thought I'd pass along the invite." I didn't answer right away. She rushed to add, "It's up to you, of course, but your mother asked that you know." "Did Vera?" I asked. A pause. "She's not saying much these days. Keeps to herself, mostly." I thanked her, hung up, and never dialed back. Instead, I lit a single candle that night. I unfolded the laminated letter again, the one my dad wrote me before his final tour, the one that had lived in my boot through more missions than I could count. I didn't read the whole thing. I knew every word, but the last line always pulled me back. "You've earned your place. Don't let anyone rewrite it." I whispered it into the flicker of that candle. "I made it, Dad. Not home, but somewhere I can breathe." I stepped outside onto the porch. The night sky was open, clear and uncrowded. Stars hung like quiet sentinels. The breeze carried the scent of pine and frozen earth. It filled my lungs in a way nothing else could. Behind me, Delta stirred but didn't follow. Even she knew this was mine to carry alone. I didn't think about Vera much anymore. But sometimes, in conversation, someone would mention what they'd heard. She lost her job, never got rehired. Word is, the bank blacklisted her across the region. Car was repossessed. She's living with her aunt now. She doesn't go out much, says folks stare. People thought I'd want to hear that it would satisfy something in me. But it didn't. Because justice isn't always loud, and it isn't always sweet. Sometimes it's just the absence of fear when you walk into a room. Sometimes it's not needing to answer the phone when your mother finally calls. Sometimes it's silence. Clean and deep and real. That's what I had now. Of course, not everything healed. I still woke up from dreams where I was back overseas, desert sun, burning metal, adrenaline pounding. Other nights, I'd dream of standing in that bank lobby, hearing the shredder chew my check while no one said a word. But when I woke up, I wasn't in their house. I wasn't under their roof. I was mine again. And that made all the difference. I kept a journal now. Not for therapy, not for clarity, but for legacy. Not theirs. Mine. The first page read, "This time, I tell my own story." And I do. Every day. Sometimes, the people who hurt you the most aren't strangers. They're the ones who once called you family. But the truth has a way of resurfacing, and silence, when used wisely, speaks louder than rage. Have you ever been cut out by the people who were supposed to stand by you? Share your story in the comments. And if this one moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more real stories that fight back.